I'm going to press that button. Oh, crikey, all the buttons are pressed. Excellent. This is it. We're very definitely live on the YouTubes. Hello, good evening, everyone. Hello, welcome to Rail Natter. We're live. This is it. And Lindsay is here. Hi,
Hello.
Lindsay. We have got a little crew joining us this evening. We're going to be talking about, well, what are we going to be? Let's go back to the title card so everyone knows what on earth is going on. We're going to be talking about well, actually, okay, it's not strictly. This was a bit of a hook because it's not all going to be about e-bikes. We're going to cover like a few different subjects around the theme of the bicycle, I believe, Lindsay.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, we're going to be covering many bicycle things. So this is obviously some people might say, well, it's a bit tangential, isn't it? Isn't this supposed to be a railway podcast? But bicycles and railways are they go hand in hand. They're a match made in heaven, and we're going to talk a bit about that. But also we're going to have a nerdy chat about building e-bikes because Lindsay does this, and it's
I do.
Deeply fascinating. Yes, well, people are here. They can hear us. How's the sound? Everyone's there. There's some people saying they like bicycles. Thank you, Cameron Burrows. I'm glad you like bicycles. You're probably in the right place then. Let's press on with the news, Lindsay. Firstly, this is not particularly exciting news, but it's nonetheless it's a thing, which is that Bombastum is now a reality. Bombardier and Alstom have merged, or rather, they haven't really merged. What Alstom have done is gobble up the train manufacturing bit of Bombardier, for better or worse. It remains to be seen what that will result in terms of job retention or loss in the UK. I mean, theoretically, it shouldn't be about losses because there is a huge latent need for new rolling stock. And the railways continue to be, despite COVID. Like COVID is a transient and short-term thing, really. The growth across Europe is massive for the need for new rolling stock. So hopefully it's a good thing, but I don't know. Remains to be seen. That's the news item. The next news item is this is I don't know if anyone's been following these. It's COVID. These trends, have you seen these, Lindsay? Have you spotted me posting these?
I have seen these trends, and I'm just looking at it. It's very interesting how, when all road vehicles drop down to about 40% of what they were, cycling shot up massively, and then just steadily declined as road traffic started coming back and the roads started being lethal to ride on again. So
yeah, it's I mean, people this is one of those situations where people go, but it's correlative, not causative. And what I said to those people is, okay, go out and ride on the busy roads and come back and tell me if you want to do it again.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's if I may speak on a personal capacity right now, it's not surprising cycling has actually gone down below where it used to be, because not only are the drivers back on the roads, but they're angry and frustrated and even worse than they normally are. I mean, it's like basically every cyclist I know has a story about a driver either being, ludicrously unsafe or actually knocking them off. And now it's just like, instead of people just being inconsiderate, I've got people actually had tried to run me off the road, which is right, when I've had errands to run, when I needed to deliver stuff for work, it's like I've been doing that at sort of like the small hours of the morning when there's no one about. Because if I'm about at any other time,
you get run off the road.
It's like playing Frogger, but with like cars which will steer into you rather than just trundling on their merry way, and you might just happen to get hit. No. It's like they're actually just. There seems to be like a dramatic increase in them. People who are just sort of like out for blood, and I'm just
it was definitely true that certainly when lockdown was happening, when the few cars were driving around, they were going notably faster. A lot of people just driving around quite a bit faster on York's roads, certainly. In any case, the COVID trends for transport. So what I've done is I've added now kind of vertical lines representing some of the key moments throughout the last year. So national lockdown, it's pretty obvious what happened. Everyone stopped moving around, other than the cyclists, who very much did start moving around a lot. It's a shame there isn't good data for how many people started walking, actually, because that would also have shot upwards. Road vehicles very rapidly started climbing again, and bus services rapidly climbing, and rail actually sort of fairly rapidly turned the corner, although a bit lower usage than bus services. And there have been a few suggestions for that. I think my favourite one, without any validation, is that bus services, because you have smaller vehicles with smaller capacities, but more of them, they can carry more people with social distancing than trains can, which are larger but fewer of them. So that's this interesting suggestion as to why there's that difference between the two. The other is so then the other thing is you see between the rule of 6 I've marked up, and you can see that already rail usage was faltering and bus usage was starting to do funny things because we started to have these regional lockdowns already by that point. So that was already interrupting rail, and then once the rule of 6 came in and we had more and more regional lockdowns and then obviously national lockdown, rail's just taken a massive hit. But also you can see both road and bus after that national lockdown, as you would expect, both of them took a hit as well. And then cycling, lo and behold, leapt upwards again. So, be interesting to see what that does kind of between now and the end of the year.
Yeah.
So, that's that. It's a rather depressing state of affairs, but the expectation at the moment is that there'll be a leap to 75% for public transport usage fairly rapidly once there's a decent coverage of the vaccine. So, fingers crossed.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, it's just like, we've done as well as we have with the vaccine despite everything. And to be honest, it's like, I feel my main concern is like, I can see things going more or less back to normal, but I can also see people being a little bit more leery of public transport than they used to be. And honestly, just like, especially with the priorities of this government, my real concern is they're going to just go, oh, we need more roads, we need more road capacity. We're going to just embed this in, climate change be damned, everything else be damned. It's, I don't know. I'd say I'm cautiously optimistic, but also I can see how it would go very pear-shaped. So.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, what you've just described is precisely the trajectory that the government has been pursuing of late. They haven't done any of the things they could have done while this was happening. The Treasury are desperate for this fare increase, even though it's ridiculous that they're pushing that forwards. In any case, yeah. So that's the trend, and yeah, we keep a close eye on it and the policy relating to it. The next bit of news is a positive one, which is that anger works.
Hey.
Hooray!
Sure does.
This is Reading West Station, or rather the future Reading West station building. But you'll see that it's no longer a corrugated shed. They have put pretend brick or possibly even real brick on it and some glass to make it a little bit better. They've also improved the actual road design as well. They've kind of pushed the road surface or sort of the curb line back so that there's not this interruption. I mean, it would be better if there was a massive pedestrian crossing sort of right the way across the width of the bridge to allow people to cross rather than just epoxy thing at the other end. But it is an improvement on the previous one, which received the Perry Bar treatment of everyone went, what the hell is this? And got very loudly angry about it. Anger works.
Yeah, anger does work. It's just like if you want to get anything changed. Speaking as someone who's in local government, just like councillors don't really change anything. What changes things is when you can't just ignore an issue, you can't just sweep it under the rug. It's when you've got sort of like angry people blowing at your phone, turning up in person, emailing you, calling you, all the rest of the things. Anger works, but sort of so does persistence. So does this is not going to go away. You've got to actually address it, or it's going to be a very interesting time for you to come. Trying to deflect the ever-growing wave of anger at your total inaction, which, you might very well think there's been examples of that sort of thing happening in Leicester, but, I couldn't possibly comment.
I mean, it's a good point. We have a lot of people who ask in the chat, regularly ask in the chat, well, what do you recommend doing to change this, to change that? And I realise we have an elected representative on RailNet tonight, and Lindsay, it is actually useful to get your perspective on these things, and I think this will come up again and again through some of the slides. Actually, I'm looking forward to that.
Do you mind if I do a brief aside on it now, or do you want me to do it later?
For it. Well, we can.
Okay,
do it now. Let's go for RailNet side by side. Hello, we're back, everyone.
Hi there. So, I mean, honestly, when it comes to changing things, the big thing is going to be sort of like what the structure of your local authority is. Because if you've got a committee system like in Brighton and Hove, that means it's sort of like an individual council will have a fair amount of clout because they're sort of committees which actually make, the major decisions of what the council is going to do, and officers will like take care of the day-to-day. So that means that sort of like lobbying your individual local councillor there can be a very effective strategy indeed, because they're actually making substantive decisions. Somewhere like Leicester, which has a mayor and cabinet system, or some which has a leader and cabinet system, very much in those kind of cases, you have to take your case, or at least make a nuisance for yourself to the mayor or to the leader of the council themselves, because ultimately they're the people who decide what goes. I mean, for instance, in Leicester's case, about the only substantive vote that we have as individual backbench councillors is the annual vote on the budget. And of course, that is whipped on party lines. So if I were to vote against the budget, I'd probably have the whip withdrawn at minimum. I might get suspended from the party. all these kind of consequences. So what will happen in a city like Leicester very much depends on what the mayor wants to do. And, you know, obviously I won't be commenting specifically on what I think of the mayor. I think people who are aware of the standards I hold myself to can make a fair guess, but I can neither confirm nor deny the veracity of whatever it is you might come up with. But yeah, generally speaking, if it's a leader and cabinet system, if it's a mayor and cabinet system, you need to sort of like kick up a stink, make a name for yourself. Sort of like I don't want to say make life difficult, but certainly make it known that this is an issue and it's not going away.
Working together as a campaign, right? So building momentum behind public campaigns.
Yeah, and it helps to have individual councillors on side. Like, there's a number of causes which, you know, I've spoken with, I've, you know, given advice to, I've helped out, but in a fair number of cases, because of the way the system in Leicester works, the only thing I have any direct control over is I get 1 out of 3 votes in the ward on where the ward community fund goes, which is a pot of about, I think it's about £18,000 a year that we decide where it goes. That's the only thing that, you know, myself and my other 2 ward councillors actually directly control. So, you know, if the scope under American system is limited for individual councillors, I don't have that official duty, but I try to, you know, go above and beyond anyway. As people who see me dress up as Tanukis raised food banks, but if you're Brighton and Hove Overcoming system, definitely work on individual councillors, get as many on side as you can, because, you know, at that point, decision making is decentralised. And there's sort of like much more scope for actually getting things done by involving individual councillors, which unfortunately in other places isn't quite so accessible.
Yeah. There was a bit of an internet. We kept all of that. I think we heard all of that, but there was a bit of an internet dropout just in case there's something that if there's anything going on your end that you can spot. Indeed, everyone's going to hear the Skype reconnection sound, which we'll don't worry about it, folks. We're going to continue anyway with the news, and Lindsay will hopefully drop back in shortly.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you, yeah. Have you dropped video just to help the bandwidth a bit?
Yeah, video has dropped, unfortunately. Like, IV Cam at the moment has decided not to connect, so
that's okay.
See if it reconnects. If not, you'll just get to look at my very funky flashing thing. Anyway,
that's
fine.
We've got the audio. We're still running.
You got audio. It's all good.
Yeah, exactly. So. Anger works. That's our news conclusion there. So the other thing is the next news item is let's laugh about this. Hopefully everyone spotted this. There's a lot of this is funny.
Oh god,
it's very funny. So basically Vissim is a traffic modeling software that is basically the scourge of modern society, because people like the person who created this firstly think that what they're creating bears any resemblance to reality, which this doesn't. Also, look how many people are getting out of the car at the bottom there. That was like 1, 2, 3, 4.
Oh, look at the guy just got hit by the car.
Oh yeah, that guy just got minced. So this is like the people getting hit by cars is like, well, okay, sometimes you get a bit of an error in these things. What for me is funnier than all the people getting hit by cars, or indeed the 12 or 13 people getting out of one car individually, is that anyone looks at this and doesn't go, this is just a junk taxi rank. For anyone who's not sure what this is this is an amateur. So this isn't the actual this isn't the Boring Company themselves. This is an amateur setting up a Vissim model of the taxi rank at one end of Elon Musk's or the Boring Company's loop transit system. I'm doing rabbit ears, but you can't see my hands doing it. Basically, what it is a lane of traffic buried underground. Or a lane of traffic in each direction buried underground with a taxi rank at each end. And Elon Musk and the Boring Company are trying to suggest that this is a form of mass transit, which, as you see from this video, it isn't. And if anyone's ever been to a taxi rank anywhere... Oh, that lady just got minced. If anyone's been to a taxi rank anywhere, they'll see that taxi ranks don't function like this at all, particularly when everyone's wearing cosplay. So, yeah, no, this is very funny. I strongly recommend everyone... finding this and laughing at
it is generally deeply funny, because this is the sort of stuff I used to do when I was 15, except I did it with trains because trains are just cooler. But also, it's just like, even more recently, it's just like when I was first campaigning to get elected, I was just like, hey, we should really do something about Leicester's mass transit. And I So I took it upon myself to design a bus station. I designed it with, two platforms, one either side, and an island platform. So you had sort of like 4 lanes of traffic, two in each direction.
Yeah.
And I was just like thinking, this is only 24 meters long. So you have like a bi-articulated bus, and you've got two of them. Oh, we'll need to make it a bit longer so you can fit two in, just in case you end up two of the same lane at the same time. And I was just like, oh, I don't know if this has enough capacity, this, that, and the other. But then I look at this, and I just feel like so much better about myself. I just feel like, I should really stop beating myself up on grounds of competence when, you can put out shit like this and still be taken seriously.
I know, it's just a joke. Yeah, there's a lot of people trying to. It's just the idea that anyone basically it's impossible to reason with anyone who looks at this and thinks that it's like a nod. Anyone who looks at this and goes, yes. It's just how can anyone they're beyond reason, absolutely beyond reason.
Absolutely.
Yes, which is nice. So we're going to go to this picture here, which is of a dismantled bicycle, because we're going to be. This is to remind me to not charge into the next slide, basically, because we're finally. Wait a minute, how many? We're 16 minutes in. It's going well, Lindsay. We're 16 minutes in, and we're just starting with the introduction. So all it remains for me to say is welcome to tonight's Rail Natter. The lovely In-City 225 fading out marvelously into the distance there. And we go, in fact, well, this is, so your video's not working, but we do have a picture of your face, Lindsay, and indeed quite a spectacular mohawk.
My video should be working, yes. This was back when I actually could be bothered to cultivate a mohawk because I had people to impress and wasn't stuck inside all day, so...
Oh yeah, we've got video.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to growing it out again, I've got to admit, but it's just, yeah. Oh boy.
My hair cannot achieve this. It as you can see, it's a bit floppy and just makes a mess. So I can't really do anything with it. In any case, so it's a chance for you to actually introduce yourself, to sort of tell everyone who you are and what you do. I think, because there are probably quite a few people in the video who don't necessarily who aren't familiar with your various Twitter sort of themes that you appear on within Twitter. So it's possibly a chance for you to explain who you are, Lindsay.
Yeah, all right. So for those who don't know me, my name's Lindsay Broadwell. I'm currently a sitting councillor on Leicester City Council, representing a Western Ward for the Labour Party, of course. And in sort of like a previous life, I studied engineering at Loughborough, and then I moved on to study 3D design and animation at De Montfort University, and I've got 2 degrees on my wall there, neither of which helped me land a job yet, not a proper job, but... I still put my skills to good use. So one of the things I've sort of been doing, sort of taught myself to do actually over lockdown, is to sort of like build, maintain, service, and convert both bicycles and electric bicycles. And one of the things I've been specializing in is sort of like building electric bicycles to people's specifications. Because the honest truth is, a lot of the electric bikes you'll buy off the shelf, they have tiny batteries. The batteries are proprietary. The range isn't great. The pedal assist is, shall we say? So I decided, what any engineering inclined person would do, and I was just like, I bet I can do better than that. And so I started sort of like buying secondhand bicycles and just converting them, and that's kind of been sort of like a little bit of a side business for me through lockdown. Although I haven't made an enormous amount of money out of it, but it's been a learning experience.
Because you're too honest with you sell it for like parts and not much more. I think.
I sell it for part. I sell it pretty much for parts. Yeah, which that does mean that when it comes to doing my tax, I would say, well, this is a business expense, that was a business expense, but it also means that I haven't made an enormous amount of money off all this because I do basically trade these things at cost. But yeah, honestly, it's just like I've had so many people who've wanted to get back on a bike, but just haven't had the stamina, or have been like, I don't know what to go for because I buy a bicycle that can't carry any freight, it doesn't have mud guards, the electric assists, they're really, really expensive, and it's like the cheapest I can do a conversion for, changing nothing else about the bike, is about £500. So that's about $250 for the motor and the controller, and same again for the battery. And you look at commercial e-bikes, it's like you can get them for that kind of price range, but they're terrible.
Yep.
And anything worth having is sort of like £2,000, £3,000, which is just to call it a shock is to be a bit too kind, I think. But yeah.
And this is what we're going to go through, I think. So you've sent a lovely slide deck, which we're going to go through.
Mm-hmm.
So that was an introduction. I think hopefully people have got an idea of why we've got you on to talk about e-bikes. But before we talk about e-bike, well, actually no. Let's first talk about this bicycle because it's a very fetching looking machine.
Oh yeah. This this is sort of like the bicycle where it pretty much all got started, actually. This is Shrenkov, which is named for a reason we'll be no doubt getting onto later. And it was sort of like what really properly got me into electric bikes, because I had converted one before this, but this is the moment I was just like, wow, actually electric bikes can do a hell of a lot I hadn't really realized, and I'm gonna start doing more in this kind of vein in the future. So this originally, it was, I think it was something like a Day 6 Dream 21 in bright cherry red, which is like an American brand of comfort bike designed for people with, bad backs, people who used to be in the military, got broken up, all that kind of stuff. And I saw it, and it was only about like sort of 300 quid, whereas new to go for a grand. I was like, yeah, I'll give that a go. And so sort of like over the next couple of months, I converted it to electric, put a hub gear at the back, painted it black, all that kind of jazz. And it's sort of been like my workhorse since then. Like whenever I've needed to go somewhere, it's just I've taken the bike because it's there. I don't have to mess about with public transport, which is terrible in Leicester, as anyone who follows me on Twitter will be well aware. And really, I guess this is sort of the moment I went from just sort of like being interested in bikes to being sort of like, I guess, a little bit of an evangelist of bicycles, or at least electric bicycles, because it really is just kind of like the ideal individual transport solution. Because even though so much of the bike market in this country is just, oh, it sells someone a mountain bike, it sells someone a racing bike, bicycles can be really, really practical. You can carry an awful lot on them. You can do an awful lot with them. They're not expensive. They are very, ecologically sound, because, a bike like this, if I remember correctly at the time, I had something like two 36-volt, 16 ampere hour batteries running in parallel. So I had about, 1.1 kilowatt hours of storage on there, which, that sounds like an awful lot, but it's still something like, I think, a 20th of what goes into an electric car. So
Oh wow! Okay.
you could have one electric, you could have like one electric car, or you could have 20 of these. So that's sort of like the basic math I did there, and I was just like, yeah, let's push this and see where it goes. And since then, I've built about 20 electric bikes by my own hands. And
Really? 20?
Oh yeah,
20. Good grief.
yes.
So, So what the other thing that's interesting about this image is that there are cooling towers in the back. Oh, in fact, I must remember to better audio describe. I always forget myself. So the bicycle, to describe this bike, it's kind of quite low set. You're talking about it being a comfort bike. It's kind of smaller wheels, low set, kind of long handlebars.
It's 26-inch wheels, but it's elongated and your seat's lower down. It's a design known as a crank forward, which, as the name implies, rather than the pedals being directly below the seat, they're offset towards the front. So you've got a much more sort of like relaxed, comfortable riding position than you'd otherwise have. And I mean, this, on the endurance I had in the battery, I could ride for about 4 hours, and I wasn't even slightly sore by the end of it. So I chalked that up to a win, personally.
It's like definitely. It's like halfway towards a recumbent, isn't it? It's like halfway between a recumbent and a standard cycle. It's So it's interesting. So sorry, go on.
Yeah, it's a nice compromise, actually, because I used to be sort of like very big into recumbent bikes. In fact, my first proper bike that I had was a recumbent. It's a Dutch Batavus Relax, but that got stolen, sadly. But the thing about recumbents is like they look weird, and a lot of people don't want to give them a chance. And also, they're not very commonly made. They're very expensive. Whereas something like this, it's got all the advantages. It's got most of the advantages of a recumbent, but it's packaged in a way that a lot of people can go, oh, that's a regular bicycle. I know how to ride this. This isn't nearly as intimidating. So it's sort of like a very nice compromise in a way. So
such a major thing with bicycles, isn't it? It's that intimidation to start doing it, which I suppose is why e-bikes are fantastic, because they help break down some of those initial barriers of kind of trepidation about hopping on a bike. Before which I'm sure we'll continue to touch on. Keep sending the questions, by the way, everyone in the chat. Simon Zev Kendler asks, and you might well touch on this later, but I'll ask it anyway. What do you do? Lindsay, what do you do with operating within the legal power and speed limits? How does that work?
Okay, so the legal situation in Britain is a little bit fuzzy. If you have an electric bike from before 2016, which Sharenkov is, you're allowed to have a throttle because they've been grandfathered into the new regulations. But the new regulations require, I forget exactly what the terminology is, they require it to be something like an electric assisted pedal cycle, or an EAPC, I think is the term for it. And that has a different set of requirements. You're not allowed to have a throttle. You've instead got to have what's known as a pedal assist sensor, which detects when you're pedaling.
Oh.
Are. And but the trouble is, pedal assist sensors are not the most reliable things in the world. They can break very easily, and to be honest, it also makes pulling away a little bit more of a pain, because a lot of electric bikes, especially the cheap ones, they don't bother with a derailleur. So they don't bother with, a proper internal hub gear, or, something which you can shift or stop. They've got a derailleur. So if you start off coming up to a stoplight and it's, you're in high gear, instead of just having the power available straight away, you've instead got to still press down quite hard on the pedals to get the damn thing to turn on. So operating within the legal limits, you're allowed a maximum power, I think, of 250 watts and a maximum speed of 15.5 miles an hour. And everything I build sort of fits within that. But in practice, as long as you're not going over the speed limit, as long as you're not, doing anything reckless or stupid like riding at 30 miles an hour, or, riding without a crash helmet, or, generally being dangerous. Generally speaking, I've found that in practice, the police don't really tend to look that closely. So, for instance, I could get pulled over on Shrenkov, and I have to explain, the fact that it's been grandfathered in is allowed to have a throttle. But in practice, it's basically like, as long as you're not endangering anybody, as long as being a considerate rider. Generally speaking, people don't really care.
Yeah, if it's basically doing what a bicycle does, then it's not. If you're racing through town, leaving a trail of fire behind you, then someone's going to notice. But if you're essentially, it looks like you're riding a bicycle around and not doing particularly non-bicycly things, you're grand. So we're also going to gloss over the very fetching-looking leather satchel that's attached to this bicycle, because it is very fetching. However, we must talk about the cooling towers in the background, because although these don't belong to the type of power station that you're a major advocate of, I think it's worth us touching very briefly on nuclear energy, particularly when it comes out of power stations, because a lot of people replied to the video title card when I advertised this as nuclear bikes, which theoretically is what a lot of e-bikes ought to be, but just not directly.
I mean, in France they already kind of are, but over here it's sort of like, well, it's a 20% nuclear electric bike, 20%. So, or it might be more like 15, because a couple of the stations have gone offline now. But anyway. Yeah.
So nuclear power is basically, it's a thing that still continues to cause a bit of controversy among green folks. For it actually comes to similar reasons to a lot of the HS2 battles that I end up fighting. I think, and it's the idea. It's a lot of deep-rooted ideas about environmental destruction that don't necessarily match with the reality. And also partly, I suppose, it's that the fossil fuel lobby have successfully made people think that gas is a cleaner source of energy than coal somehow, which it isn't really.
Yeah,
it's the same.
It isn't. I mean, it's like when you factor in the fugitive emissions from gas, it's actually about as bad as coal in terms of the climate. Like, it doesn't pollute as much, but also, natural gas wells are fairly fond of exploding. You have LPG tankers running right through cities now, which is just completely and utterly insane. But we're doing it anyway because, they pay an awful lot of, they allegedly pay an awful lot of public relations companies to keep that little fact out of the public eye. So
it's similar with the amount of gas that's lost through transmission pipelines that just people don't really realize. But the amount of methane we pump directly into the atmosphere is staggering, absolutely staggering. Anyway, so in all of this, you find yourself battling people about nuclear quite a lot. I don't really know how to summarize the discussion other than what frustrates you about the nuclear debate?
I mean, what frustrates me about it is just the one thing that a lot of anti-nuclear advocates get right is that, previously in the past, nuclear energy was advocated a fair amount in bad faith. I mean, it's like when you look at what the British government did when they were building, the first commercial power station at Calder Hall. They said, it'll be electricity too cheap to meter. And, that was sort of like a massive lie, because Calder Hall was only about 20% efficient, something like that, at producing electricity. And its sort of dual purpose, arguably some might say its main purpose, was actually producing plutonium and other weapons material for Britain's nuclear bomb program. And the thing is, it's like, you tell a lie like that, you end up just sort of like coloring the debate for decades to come. Because, this was the kind of accusation being levied, not exactly unfairly, against sort of like the later advanced gas-cooled reactor fleet, which was, just purely designed for commercial operation, no weapons production involved. And in fact, it still kind of crops up now when you look at what's going on with Hinkley Point C and Sizewell C. Is, pressurized water reactors are absolutely atrocious at producing weapons-grade material. No one would do it because you've got to separate out so many other fission products and you've got to undergo so many additional refining steps. It's just not worth it. You'd build a graphite pile on the fan if you wanted plutonium. But the thing is, because of that lie the government told, people are still like, oh, nuclear power stations, they used to produce nuclear bombs. That they're not. The economics of it just don't work out for one thing. And the other thing is the plants are not designed to do that. And it's like you can either design a reactor to produce plutonium or you can produce power. You can't really very easily do both. And, you know, when it's utility companies building these, they want to make money. They want to generate as much electricity as possible. They're not going to say,
they don't want to waste a load of land and a load of process in creating the exploding stuff. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But I mean, honestly, like the big frustration I've got is sort of like my big frustration. And this crosses into so many areas. In fact, a lot of renewables advocates have, brought this up, and I agree with them. It's just the government doesn't seem to think it should actually, govern anymore. It doesn't seem to think, oh, we should pay for public infrastructure with public money. It's like they've got to say, oh, you've got to get the private sector involved. We've got to work in partnership with our beloved partners in the private sector. Oh, yes, we've got to offer financial incentives, which, in the case of Hinkley Point C, the cost of building, operating, maintaining, fueling, and decommissioning Hinkley Point C is about £35 per megawatt hour. The cost of the electricity being generated is something like £105 per megawatt hour adjusted for inflation. So 2/3 of the cost of the plant is paying back the investors because we put it on a 9% discount rate for some reason, and only 1/3 of that is the cost of the actual plant. And the thing is, it's like you see this across the board. You see this as sort of like privatized infrastructure projects, like Nottingham's trams, for instance, is just that was built on partially, I think, on a PFI, so there's always punishing repayment schedules attached to that. And you also see it with a bunch of renewable projects because they say, oh well, we can't just build this wind farm, we can't just build this tidal barrage. No, we've got to get the private sector involved. And it's just at the moment you've got to sort of like woo investors and persuade them to invest. Not only do you waste an enormous amount of time, having to wine and dine some of the worst people on the planet to persuade them to give you money, but you also end up having to basically bribe them with, I say bribe, but you've got to give them financial incentives to put their money where their mouth is, which again in Hinkley Point C translates to a 9% rate of interest at a time when on public finance
we'd be getting paid. The government would be
money.
Yes. Oh my goodness, we'd be earning money for
we would be
privilege
earning
of borrowing
money. It's like at the moment, if you got a credit card and you got say 24 months 0% interest on purchases, it's cheaper for you to use that credit card and just pay it off every month. So it's cheaper for you. I'm trying to think of how to phrase this. Okay, let's say you've got a 0% interest credit card at the moment, and you're using that to make a single £2,000 purchase, which you're going to pay off over the next 2 years with no interest. You're actually spending less money to do it that way than you would saving up for the thing and then buying it because of inflation, which is at the moment running, I think, about 3% per year. So if you're, say, amortizing, say, a £2,000 personal purchase over 2 years, you end up paying about sort of like 6% less than you would if you saved up for it. And it's kind of like a similar situation like that now with governments, where it's just like, hey, money is ludicrously cheap. We should be building infrastructure. We should be building public works. We should be building, massive amounts of social housing, massive amounts of, clean energy, massive amounts of rail infrastructure, and reopening some of what beach and closed. But instead of doing that, just like, oh, well, we've got to go to the wisdom of the market. And it's just, the thing about the market is the market has instincts, but it doesn't have a brain. If you wanted to do any actual constructive thinking, you've got to actually govern. And that's what so many politicians just seem to be absolutely allergic to. And it drives me up the wall. It's like, you're elected to govern, to build stuff.
Having a plan. It's that having a plan thing, isn't it? Right? Just have a plan. Oh man, have a plan. Anyway, that's good.
Have a plan.
This was going to be a cathartic episode, wasn't it? Where both of us just like get really frustrated and like wave our fists around.
Yeah, I got most of my ranting out before the episode, which thank you, Gareth, for putting up with that. But yeah, it's safe to say, just people said to me, "Oh, Lindsay, now you got elected, you're not going to be as radical. They're going to assimilate you." No, being elected has made me more radical, not less.
Hooray! So, this is good
because I get to see up close and personal exactly how broken everything is. So if anybody's thinking I should go into politics, but I'm worried I'm not competent enough, do it. The fact that you're worrying about that says to me you're competent enough, more so than an awful lot of people in politics right now. So, yeah.
Borrow to invest, everyone. It's time.
Borrow to invest.
Good grief. Yeah. Right. So, next image. There we go. So, tell us about what's on screen, Lindsay. What's this?
Yeah, this is actually the first electric bike I built for someone other than myself. This is kind of like where it all got started in a way. And this, originally I was building it for a friend who was going to be coming up to live in Leicester, but then, due to whole pandemic business decided that they wouldn't in the end. And it was kind of sort of like a learning experience because I'd never really built or worked on bikes before and didn't really know what I was doing. So as some of you may be able to notice, the back mud guard is much higher than it should be, and the front wheel has a disc brake rotor on it, which is not actually connected to anything. But this is sort of the point where, actually I could probably make a go of this, actually like building, converting stuff. Because one of the things I like doing with my bikes is I like sort of like putting a lot of pride and effort into them to make them look good. So they've all got sort of like a little bit of a theme and obviously like effort and care put into them. And this one I sort of wanted to go for something vaguely cyberpunk. So I call it Cortex. It's got sort of like a couple of purple accents on it. It's got carbon fiber tape, which doesn't show very well in this picture, but
oh, you can just about see it in the
yeah, just about. But I mean, the main thing about this is this has a 360 watt-hour battery. It's got a 3-speed gearbox in the back, and it's got a hub motor on the front. If you're buying something like this commercially, they'd probably ask about £2,000 for it. I built that for 600.
Really?
So, yeah, for 600 in parts, and then if I was charging labour, it'd be about 200 in labour, so about £800. But yeah,
because I was going to say the labour element is that filling up the gap, but actually, it's if you're charging yourself at a reasonable rate, it's still cheaper than buying it. Yeah.
This was about 10 hours work and charging 20 quid an hour for labor. You're looking at about 800 for that. And I mean that's honestly the thing, because the other thing I want to talk about with this is if you look at the battery, if you look at the controller box above it and the motor, these also like very sort of like standardized parts from China. They also like use the same connections. They come more or less in kit form. And the thing I like about them is if any single element fails, you can just buy a replacement and repair it. It's sort of like they actively sort of encourage it. Like, whenever I've had problems with my supplier, because, not all suppliers are good, but mine, Yosa Power, has been, consistently really good. From like, hey, this part is broken, can I buy another one? They're like, yeah, sure, it's such and such, and we'll send it out to you, and here's fitting instructions, stuff like that. Because the other thing I really don't like about a lot of commercial e-bikes is they're very locked down, they're very proprietary. So it's like, for instance, if you wanted to go for like a Bosch e-bike, not only do you have to get a special frame which will actually accept their mid-drive motor, but you've got to use a Bosch controller, you've got to use a Bosch battery, you've got to use a Bosch display. And their display on some models, I think, has a wonderful little part strip where it's got a secondary little rechargeable battery. And if that goes flat, well, it can basically destroy itself. You can't put a charge into it, and the battery and the bike won't operate with that. So if you sort of like buy an e-bike and then put it in the shed over winter for like 4 months, 6 months, you come back to it and it's like, oh, my bike won't turn on. You take it to the service center and it's like, oh, well, yeah, your battery's dead. We've got to replace it. And then, rather than just like opening up the display and I think it's in the display and then swapping out this little battery, instead you've got to buy an entire new controller unit for sort of like 200, 300 quid. And I'm just like, that's scummy. That's kind of shit I hate Apple for. And it's like commercial bikes are sort of going after Apple in a way. It's like everything's proprietary. You can't repair anything. You can't expand it.
That was I don't want to do a downer on the sector, because obviously e-bikes are a good thing and we need more of them. But I was going to ask what that price difference. Where do you think that's coming from? Are they deliberately? Are they trying to match what they think it's quite a barrier to entry. Surely it's stopping them sell more bikes. Do you think that is there a genuine sort of fairly sensible reason for it, or is it perhaps that the market's not mature yet?
I think there's kind of a mix of factors. I mean, one of the factors that I've noticed is the government, I think, under Wheels to Work, will subsidize electric bikes up to sort of like 42% of their sticker price. So I imagine you would allegedly get a little bit of inflation on that. And then the other thing is, because a lot of them use like bespoke frames, bespoke parts, it's low volume, it's more expensive to produce in the first place. And then, you sort of got all the additional business expenses on top of that. But I do think the price is inflated. I think they're charging a lot more than they're actually worth. And I don't think that what you get for the price is actually necessarily worth it, to be honest, because it's like, well, sort of like taking as example, so like one of the bikes I saw in Evans Cycles the other week. They were charging £3,000 for something with a 400 watt-hour battery, 250 watt motor. It had a lot of fancy bells and whistles. It's very nicely put together, but it's incredibly expensive. And so many people are going to look at that and be like, that costs as much as a car does. Why would I bother? So really, I think we need sort of like two things. I think we need sort of like a lot more standardizations. We have sort of like an absolute workhorse of a design, sort of like, I guess, an analog to the flying pigeon type of bicycle that China was pumping out millions and millions of at one point. And then you need something which just it's simple, it's rugged, it's reliable, it's easy to service, the parts are widely available, and it needs to be cheap, because honestly, a lot of the components in electric bikes, that none of them are particularly complicated, none of them are particularly expensive. So, for instance, on that bike there, you've got a hub motor, which is basically just a little brushless DC motor inside a planetary gearbox inside a motor hub. It's got holes and stuff drilled in it for the blades and spokes and stuff like that. Controllers are box standard brushless motor controllers. Some have Hall sensors, some don't, but that's like a couple of quid's price difference. And batteries, you can get sort of like a 12 amp hour, 36 volt battery for about sort of like 150 quid these days. They're not expensive. They're dirt cheap. Like, the cell performance and longevity isn't going to be as good as, a sort of like top of the range, highly binned commercial e-bike, but, it's good enough. And generally, it's just like, again, this is my frustration with the government doesn't want to actually govern. It's just, if we had sort of like, a few competent people in the room coming up with a good design, it's like, okay, we've got, we've come up with this bike. It's based on completely standard frame, standard width bottom bracket, standard front and rear dropouts. The kit's all modular. You can just replace the battery, you can replace the controller, replace the motor, replace whatever. We've got a freight rag on the back that you can put panniers and a child seat on. We've also got, a whole bunch of approved accessories. You've got like a kiddie trailer. You've got sort of like one of those child trailer bikes. You've got sort of like all sorts of things. Because the thing is, it's just like, the engineer in me is just like, okay, I respect the sort of like precision and effort and all the finery that goes into a good commercial e-bike, but also I'm just like, it's proprietary. There's sort of, there's an elegance to complexity and an elegance to, well, elegance of design, but also there's an elegance to mass production and accessibility repair and just having,
it's that repair, certainly the repair element, the ability to replace and swap out components. We've had an interesting question actually, which is Memnonia is asking what you think about the Switch conversion kit, if you've heard of such a thing. I have not.
I have heard of such a thing, and I've wanted to get my hands on one for a while, but at the same time, I just looked at it and like, they're charging, I think, a 50% discount, which I was offered. There are offerings that they were charging for like £500 for the kit, and I was just like, but I can get a better kit from Yosa Power and a battery for less money and fit it myself. So it's sort of like, it's been on my radar for a while as something I've been interested in, but it's just, I've always been like, I can do better for cheaper. But then again, it's like, I'm handy returning a wrench. Like the Switch kit, from everything I've heard, is just very, very easy to convert, from e-bike to electric. So it's sort of like, I don't know how to describe it. Like I'm cautiously optimistic about it, but I haven't had the opportunity to try one. But it looks fairly promising, honestly. It's
that sounds like it's an advantage of. It's very much an advantage of fitting and it's straightforward to fit. That's the challenge.
It's very straightforward to fit. It's all like very all in one, but obviously there's going to be trade-offs with that. The battery isn't particularly big, the range isn't great, and I'm not sure how the pedal assist works, but I've heard it's not great. But again, I haven't been able to try one myself, so I can't comment.
So we're gonna I'm conscious. Crikey, I time. So this looks like. This has like a stock car vibe to it with matte paint and orange and black. This is also so this right. I shall audio describe. We have here in on some nice paving slabs. We have a folding bike but it looks very robust. The hub motor on the front has quite a chunky looking in a kind of a good way. It's got a nice aesthetic. Is the front are the wheel sizes the same?
Wheel sizes are the same. They're both 20-inch 46 BCD wheels.
The mudguard at the back gives it almost looks like a chopper. It's got like a small wheel, big wheel, even though they're the same. They look the same. This looks great. It's got a black and orange sort of vibe. It's a really fun looking little bicycle with a nice little Shimano chainset as well, by the look of it. So tell us about this bicycle. What's the story behind it?
I mean, this one, I was offered, and the kit on this is actually a bit interesting because most kits, like, you have everything separate. You've got a controller, you've got a motor, and you've got the battery, and they're also like separate but connected by wires. And this is a kit I was actually sent from a friend in China who was sort of like, hey, they're making this sort of like all-in-one kit. Do you want me to get you one? I was like, yeah, sure. And the thing is, it's just like, in a lot of ways, it's quite clunky. But also, it's just like, it's kind of the best all-in-one kit that I've got my hands on, just because it uses, despite being like a very proprietary form factor, it uses a very standard controller. It uses a very standard connector on the battery, and an XT30, I think. So it's sort of like, you've got a fairly tiny battery in there at the moment, which is only like 3.3 ampere hours or something like that, but you can connect a bigger one if you want. And also, because it's direct drive rather than geared, it's silent. So it's sort of like, what I was going for with this was sort of like a little bit of a space agey sort of aesthetic. And part of that was just, it's got to look pretty. It's got to be really quiet. And, I sold this to someone who's been, nothing but thrilled with it. And Yeah, this is a fun little one to do, and being a folding bike, it's much easier to take on trains, which segue.
Yes, well, that's it. We've got a question actually, which is Alfonso La Pulce. I might have pronounced that wrong. Sorry, Alfonso.
Mm.
Is asking about the fact there are local hourly services, TransPennine Express, who require advance booking for non-folding bikes. How does an e-cycle help that issue? Well, this is how. You get a folding e-cycle. Is one of the solutions. I think we're going to touch on cycling provision. I think there's a slide later on where we'll kind of talk and maybe get a bit angry
Well,
about
I
this
was putting a bike on the train and was being a bit naughty, but yeah.
yeah. But if it's a folding bike, you don't need to book ahead, and this is a folding bike, so presumably you just put it in the luggage rack.
Yeah, because that's kind of one of the things I have sort of like pivoted towards building folding bikes instead of full size bikes, just because they're easier, a lot more manageable. Like even trains aside, a lot of people in Leicester live in terraced houses, which don't have a lot of space inside, don't have very wide doorways. And if you try and sell one sort of like someone sort of like a 30-kilogram electric bike, it's going to be like it's a bit of a hard sell. But if you sell someone a folding bike, then it's much more manageable, and to be honest, they're more fun to work on because they take up a lot less space in my house, which my house is very grateful for. So
yeah. So that's a folding e-bike. This is so we have on screen Star Blaster, which is
this is a folding bike where I actually knew what I was doing.
Yes. So it's another folding bike. It's a different aesthetic with some nice white finishing and a sort of a bluey silver, kind of aluminum silvery sort of frame color. It's nice. Yeah. It's nice, this one.
It is. It's that's kind of one of the ones I'm most proud of because it was commissioned, but I did like a very neat job of it, I like to think. And again, this sort of like reflects a bit of the engineering paradigm that we lost, because this bike here, it's what's known as a Hercules. It was one I think Rally were putting out an awful lot of in sort of like the 80s. And it's got, a Sturmey Archer 3-speed hub on the back. It's, all steel construction. And it's just like this bike is pretty much twice my age and is still going strong. Whereas, there's bikes I bought in the last 5 years, which have just been absolutely crap and fallen apart. So it's just sort of like, it's amazing what you can accomplish with a little bit of TLC and, some good engineering in the first place. And yeah, like I say, I'm pretty proud of how this one came out.
It's amazing how, there's a definite sort of longevity of older bikes. I had my first road bike was a 1984 Peugeot Provence. Yeah. I bought it secondhand. It was okay. There were some issues with metric seat posts, which meant that I could never have the seat in the right height because finding a replacement was completely impossible. But other than that, I loved that bike, and it was a tough thing. The wheels had been replaced, and funnily enough, the part of the bicycle that failed were the wheels, and indeed I eventually got hit by a car on it. It was a hit and run. It was horrible. And the bike, sadly, the front forks folded because of the crash, and it was a bit of a mess. But the frame was fine, actually. I got it checked for hairline fractures. The frame was fine. They're lovely. Like, older bikes do have some longevity. I suppose there was when I was a kid, everyone got Apollo bikes from Halfords, and they were dreadful. Like, the quality was really not great.
They were horrible.
And they weighed a ton.
But the big thing with older bikes is they were made of steel, and they weren't sort of like value engineered as much as they are now, because it's sort of like with the 3-speed hub, you've only got 3 gears, but it's a very simple mechanism. Sturmey Archer made millions of them. They work, and they just keep on working, especially the oil-filled ones, which you just put a few drops of oil in every now and then, and they're fine for decades. There's ones that they built in sort of like the 50s, which are still working now. But sort of like new bikes, like, you've got 21 speeds, you've got a front and rear derailleur, and it's just like, you can't sell a worthwhile bike with all those features for £300 because you're going to have to cheap out on something. That means the derailleur goes out of alignment. It means, you've got horrible cheap wheels. It means you've got brake pads which fade very easily. It means you've got, just cheap, nasty components which just don't stand the test of time. Whereas, when you look at older stuff, it was, I guess it was marketed fairly stodgily, you could say, but it lasted. It was built to last. It's sort of like, I guess it's substance of a style is kind of what I like and appreciate, and I'm just sort of like trying to aim for that with the bikes that I build, because it's like, they might not be the flashiest things in the market. They're using sort of like mass market Chinese parts, but they're good parts. They're solid. They'll work for thousands and thousands of miles. So.
Yeah, which kind of raises so Ella the developer's asked a question. Hello, Ella. Which is, oh crikey, okay, we're not going to put that picture up yet because we're going to get very excited about that. Which no, I've got distracted now. Ella's question is about maintainability. What's the difference in cost of a regular bike versus an e-bike in terms of maintenance?
In terms of maintenance, there's a couple of things extra you need to worry about on an electric bike. Firstly, you sort of got if you've got a geared motor hub, those gears are going to wear over time, but they do so, fairly slowly because they run, way below the sort of rated specification half the time. And the other thing is the battery. And what I do with my batteries is I only charge them to about 90% of their rated capacity, which puts the cells under less stress and causes them to last, much longer, about twice as long. The big thing to worry about with an electric bike is, generally speaking, wear on the battery. But I've been running like the same battery pack on Shrenkov for over a year now, and there's been no loss in capacity again because I charge it 90%. So I think the only thing to bear in mind with an electric bike is like every 5 years you might need to get a new battery. But if you're going for sort of like the batteries I use, that's maybe 100, 200 pounds you're looking at for a replacement. So it sort of like works out to, I guess, about like an extra 20 quid a year in maintenance in terms of maintenance fees. But really, a lot of them are very fit and forget. That's honestly where I go with the kits I do, because if any individual bit does fail, I can just get a replacement very easily and don't have to worry about proprietary compatibility.
Yeah. Right, okay, I'm doing it. We're going to the next image, which people might have seen 5 seconds ago. Oh my goodness me, look at this beautiful machine. This beautiful and ridiculous machine. On screen, for the people listening, on screen is what looks like a refurbished, because I believe it is, Sinclair C5, looking in very good nick with some nice Schwalbe. Are they Big Apples on the back there?
They're Big Apples on there, yeah.
Some nice Schwalbe Big Apple tires on the back. You've done a nice job of tidying it up. It looks great. This is Sinclair C5, and these are... Okay, right, Lindsay, tell us about the Sinclair C5.
Okay, so the Sinclair C5 is probably one of the most infamous electric vehicle disasters in British history, and part of that was sort of like a mix of three things, which was Sir Clive decided to launch it in January with lead-acid batteries, which don't do well in the cold, so when they tried giving them to the press to demonstrate, half of them didn't work. He tried to sell it as a car when it's really not, and... Also, he didn't just go for a bicycle in the first place, because like so many things, like I actually do have a lot of a soft spot for the C5. It's a lot of fun to ride. Like mine, the controller box blew up because, surprise, the electrics in it are 35 years old and they fail over time. But getting some good progress on replacing that. But it sort of does illustrate the problem with sort of like a lot of technological solutions, which is sort of like, people don't like riding bikes. Could that be due to the lack of infrastructure, the disdain in which they're held, the lack of government support for cycling? No. It's that it's on two wheels. It's the wrong format. We need to invent something that's like a bike but not a bike, and that's kind of where the Sinclair C5 falls. It's like it performs like a bicycle. It rides a bit like a bicycle. It's got a nice motor, unlike a bicycle, but it just kind of fell into this valley of it's a lot of fun to ride, but I would not be caught dead in traffic in it. And, the only reason I'm able to ride in Leicester is, for whatever else people say about the mayor, he has built an awful lot of rather good cycle lanes, which this will go quite happily on. So I was actually able to ride it around until the control box blew up because turns out they're using screw terminals that are over like 35 years old is a recipe for some very interesting issues with high resistance joints, which I didn't immediately notice. And my control board caught fire slightly, which is apparently a known issue with these. Yes, it does sound bad, because that's the other thing about these is it's very common for the flyback diode to blow. So it's sort of like if you push a Sinclair C5 backwards at more than walking pace, you will blow up the electrics in it, which is not fun.
I love it.
As I say, I love the aesthetic. It's like something out of Akira or something like out of another sci-fi anime from sort of like 1980s. But it's like, Clive, you should have just sold this thing as a toy. No, Clive, honey, I love you, but no.
If he'd marketed, a lot of people in the chat saying he was not a great marketer.
He wasn't. To be honest, that's kind of why I like the guy. He was not a good businessman. He was an inventor first and foremost. He was just like, I made millions and millions of pounds. I lost it. And the thing is like, he reportedly had a temper, but he's someone I have a lot of time for, just because he's not a sociopath. He's not like whatever the name of the guy is who just let Debenhams go bankrupt with 12,000 jobs because he was raiding the pension fund. Clive's a decent guy, he just didn't really have a good head for marketing, I guess. Because, if he'd launched this thing in the summer and said, the most fun you can have on three wheels, and I don't know, maybe stuck some models in it at the beach or something. It's not something like that, I guess. I mean, I would say that I'm a lesbian, but anyway, just if he'd launched it properly, I think it would have been a hit. But it just wasn't going to be much good at what he wanted it to be good at. So
I always imagine Sir Clive as being a bit of a Wallace character. It's that sort of like aimless inventor with very limited amounts of success. Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't call it limited amount of success necessarily, but I can definitely see where that comparison comes from.
Yeah. So, the thing is, it's brilliant. There's something very pleasing about it as a machine, as a bit of sort of industrial design. It's quite pleasing, even if it's made entirely of plastic inside as well.
Oh yeah, I mean the front wheel is made of plastic, so if you use the front rim brake on a really long descent, it might melt. But you didn't hear that from me. But yeah, it is something which I really love the form of it. It's actually really comfortable to ride. It's an awful lot of fun. It's something that sort of like I would want to relaunch with modern technology if I had the money for it. But I grew up in a recession, and we're going through another recession, so I can't say I'm too much mystic on that front. But anyway.
Alfonso Lapulce is saying that you need to fit a DCC decoder. Apparently, is that a reference to model trains? I think it might be. In any case, it goes over my head. That's the Sinclair C5. It's beautiful, and we're gonna have to press on to talk about. Okay, so we've got it's another folding e-bike. This one, what I love about these is the variety of all. We've had several folding e-bikes, and that they all look quite radically different, not just aesthetically, but in terms of their actual sort of the actual engineering behind them, the actual componentry and the shape and the bits. So tell us about this one. This is a black folding bike.
Yeah, this was a Dillinger Cheetah that I bought with a dead battery for about 110 quid. And I sort of dedicated myself to restoring it and, had to faff about with it a bit to get it working. But the reason why this one is interesting is it dates in 2014. So again, it comes in before the cutoff on, you're not allowed to have a throttle because reasons. But what's interesting about it is the other ones I've built have all used sort of like hub motors or mid drives, which is like a motor mounted on the pedals, which is a bit complicated. But this one, it actually has like a separate brushed DC motor, 24 volts, driving via a separate chain in the back wheel. So it's sort of like it's a little bit weird and wonderful, and it was an awful lot of fun to ride. But I did in fact actually just sell this one for about, I think, 500. Because it just wasn't quite suiting my needs, because it would only do about sort of like 13-14 miles an hour, whereas most e-bikes can do 15.5, which it's not a huge difference, but it's noticeable. And I was just like, yeah, it doesn't quite suit my needs. But yeah, the nice thing about this one is it's got 16-inch wheels, 305 BCD, and it folds up really small. I could take it on the train with me. It's great. But yeah, you're right. There's
it looks like it's got lots of folding points, and like it gets really small by the look of it.
It does, yeah. You got the folding point in the middle, handlebars fold down, seat collapses, all the rest of it. Like it folds up really, really tiny, which is great because I just had to box it up to ship to somebody. So yeah, it's a fun one. It fits on a train really well too. So,
and it's got lovely set of pannier bags on there as well, just showing kind of how how versatile even these little bikes can be in terms of moving stuff around.
Yeah, because this one, it's like if you look at the freight rack on the back, like I was carrying sort of like crates of energy drinks back from Costco because I have a problem. But yeah, it's sort of like even though it's small, it is a fairly mighty one. It's just you can glean some real practicality out of tiny folding bikes. It's just bicycles don't have to just be a toy or something to ride downhill on. They can be a practical mode of transportation, which is ultimately like what I'm all about. I'm about practicality. So
absolutely, yeah, And so, so this is actually, I should have put this at the end, because this is actually an advert. It's an advert.
Oh, this is a bit of an advert, yes. This is one of the ones that I built most recently. It's, again, 16-inch wheels, but they're slightly different. They're Brompton wheels, so they're 349 BCD. And this one, I was just like, I've never done wheel building before. I'll learn how to do it. And I did learn how to do it, but it was a horrible experience. But hey, the wheels came out well, so who cares? So it's got drum brakes front and rear. It's got a Sturmey Archer XFD on the front, and it's got a Shimano roller brake on the back. Navinci N330 continuously variable transmission hub, and if you look, the motor is actually behind the pedals. It drives the chain directly rather than having a motor mounted on either wheel, which means you get better torque and can pull more loads with it. And the battery is what's known as a frog battery, which mounts on the seat post, so you've got the rack brief carrying whatever you will. And this one, honestly, it was it's been a really interesting build because it's not like anything I've built before, and yeah, it's honestly like it's comparable to an electric Brompton. It would cost about sort of like 3 times the price. And yeah, I'm just generally really proud of it. Like, it's a great all-weather bike, and as you can see, I took this up through Bradgate Park and up sort of like around the country roads there, and it performed really well there, even like out of a city. So
Yeah, it's really strange
yeah,
seeing
but
seeing a folding bike doing off road, or sort of
yeah, I mean,
sort of
not
tracks and
exactly
things. But
off-road, but sort of like out in the sticks a little bit,
yeah,
I guess.
yeah,
But yeah,
yeah, coped
this
ably.
one, yeah. The one problem with it though, and the reason I'm selling it is I can't tow a trailer with it because the trailer I've got hitches onto the axle. And if you look closely at this, it's got the track style dropouts, these sort of like horizontal dropouts facing to the rear, which means if I put a trailer on the axle, it would tend to pull the wheel out of the back fork, and
Oh
that
yeah,
wouldn't be good.
yeah, yeah. For
So
anyone
yeah, it's
wondering
got like
what exactly Lindsay was just describing, for the benefit of people on the stream, you can see here that the sort of the shape of the hook that holds the back axle is rearwards, which means that if you
yeah.
attach a trailer onto it, your wheel's going this way, whilst your bike might well end up going this way.
Yeah, and that's not good. The nice thing about it though is you don't need a chain tensioner, which means that the chain doesn't need to dangle really close to the ground. Because before I converted this, it had a derailleur, and the mech was basically touching the ground pretty much. So anything you go past it, you get bashed on. Whereas this one actually has like a good amount of ground clearance. It's really simple. It rides really, really nicely. But like I say, it's just because I can't tow a trailer with it. I'm like, it doesn't quite fit my needs. But yeah, so if anyone's interested, if anyone would like a folding bike, if anyone's thought about getting, say, an electric Brompton but hasn't been able to afford it, this one is for sale, and the asking price at the moment is £1,200, which pretty much covers the cost of parts and some of the time I put into it, because this was more of sort of like a learning experience than a commercial proposition, which probably me showing my inner circle there, but
yeah,
so
yeah. There's a lot. If any business people are watching this,
yeah,
they're
and
going, "You should be charging your time out at 3 times the rate, Lindsay." But it's fine.
yeah, I know.
So if
But yeah,
you're
like I
interested,
say, it's a really nice bike, rides really nicely. It's just yeah.
That's it. That's the pitch. So people,
That's the pitch.
if you want to do it in the chat, you can. Although neither myself or Lindsay will notice. If you want to do it in the comments, you can do that. But also, Lindsay's on Twitter. You can find her. Lindsay
yeah,
PB.
put my link in the bio.
I'll
Lindsay
drop your
PB.
Twitter in. Yeah. I'll do that. I'll
Yeah,
drop the.
put me in a link.
Exactly. So yeah, go buy a bicycle if you're interested. With the next image, right, okay. So
The next image, bicycles and trains.
this is a subject which is close to both of our hearts and something that frustrates both of us. But I suppose it's something. Right. To start with this, a lot of people say, why can't bike provision be better in the UK? And there are lots of very complicated answers. But the main headline one is because seat capacity is at such a premium that there isn't any space to put extras, like a decent, for example, cycling coaches. That's the number one reason. Which the reason why that is the case is because we haven't invested in our railways to expand the capacity of them. So every single seat has like 1.5 people allocated to it in pre-COVID times. So that's number one reason, but we can't solve that overnight. There are things that the rail industry could do better. Getting rid of all stupid vertical bike hangers for a start, because they are hugely ableist and they're very, very difficult to use for most people. I find it very difficult, particularly when the train manager insists on you putting your bike rear, like putting the back of it up and the front wheel down. I struggle to lift a bike to do that, and I'm mildly feeble, but I struggle with that. It's really hard and really off balance as well, and you end up invariably cutting your finger and hurting yourself. Yes, Lindsay, you are strong.
See,
you would be able to lift.
I am 6'2", and I used to be a weightlifter, and I struggle because it's an awkward bloody thing to do.
Yeah, it
is.
You slice
it's
your
not a
finger
matter
off
of strength.
and...
It's a matter of just like propping up a thing with wheels that turn vertically where it's not supposed to stand is really hard and really stupid. So
they're worse than useless. So look, rail industry, stop providing them. So one of the things so in terms of lobbying, the right people to lobby to improve cycle provision is the DFT. It's government, because government are the ones that specify trains. It's not the train operating companies. They essentially have to deal with what they're given. Some of the things about mandatory booking are a bit stupid, but that's a demand management thing. So it's really them just panicking because they've got a load of people turning up all at once with bicycles, and that becomes very difficult. To be fair to the staff, the staff are then the ones who have to turn people away, which is not actually very nice. So that's kind of where the stupid things like advanced booking for cyclists comes about. It's because the demand is there. There are some points of light. One of them is, have you heard about this? The ScotRail cycling coach, Lindsay?
I've heard bits about it, but I just wanted to like mention when you're saying about the staff. For those who are listening on audio, the picture is of the first bike I owned, a recumbent bike, which I didn't think I actually named, but it was one I really enjoyed riding. And it's on a train when I was coming back from Oakham to Leicester after doing a really long ride out to Rutland Water. And the thing is, because the trains that we were on didn't have any cycling spaces at all, I was basically like a bit stuck because I was like, I bit off more than I could chew. I rode sort of like 35 miles that day and didn't fancy my chances getting back. And the staff were just like, look, if you just like put it somewhere out of the way, then that'll be fine. So I ended up sort of like just sitting on this sort of like little fold down seat, holding the back wheel of the bicycle with my foot to stop it falling over, all the way from Oakham back into Leicester. So that was tremendously fun.
Yeah, credit to the rail staff, because some of them are a bit, they can be sticklers for it. Again, I can understand that they can be put in a tricky situation, but I think pragmatism.
Like, I understand it as long as they don't take it out on you, as long as they're not rude about it, because it's sort of like, I will sort of respond in kind. It's like I will, I'll be like, okay, I understand if you can't do this, but I'm in really a bit of a situation. I'd really appreciate the help. Like if they're polite about it, I'm like, okay, that's fine. I'll figure something out. If they're just like, no, the rules are the rules are the rules. You cannot bring a bicycle on this train. I'm just like, well, screw you.
And I think there needs to be an encouragement, particularly in areas where there's a lot of cycling. There needs to be better improvements in training staff, but also it's a behavioural thing as well. So things like seats that fold down to provide bicycle storage. That's a dreadful idea, because no one, as a cyclist, I don't like asking people to get up and stand in a busy train to put my bike there. That's not fair. Even though it might be ostensibly the right thing to do according to the bylaws, it's not reasonable and fair for me to ask people to get up off a seat they've got in a busy train to fit my bicycle. So it's simple things like get rid of those seats and have it as space that is dedicated for cycling, so that you don't end up in that tricky situation. There's a very frustrating disconnect. And Simon's just mentioned it in the chat. Actually, it's a deep frustration of his, and I think a lot of people, in fact, probably everyone watching this, both you and me as well, all of us are hugely frustrated that that the UK is very poor at this provision, and a lot of it derives from the fact that there's this desperate premium on space to get people moving around. It's just that's the chronic problem that is at the deep set problem. But particularly in rural areas,
it's almost like closing lines like the Great Central was a really, really stupid thing to do.
Yeah, getting rid of redundancy in our whole railway system was hooray for that. Yeah, and even there are points of
Marples.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks all transport secretaries since Marples right the way to the present day. All of you are equally guilty for this. In any case, we have there are some points of light. The ScotRail coach is basically a Class 153 single coach. Awful passenger vehicle, but it's the best use it could possibly have is being turned into a thing to store bicycles in, and they're sticking that on the West Highland line, which is a line I've used a lot for my bicycle. That'll be good. They need to do that on a lot of railway lines if they can. The challenge is that, again, it's rolling stock shortages. It's another issue we have, is that people, it's like, well, there are lots of rural lines where space isn't a premium. Why don't we do it on those? The other issue is that we have a chronic shortage of rolling stock as well, because we don't build nearly enough. So hooray! Lots of challenges.
Again, lack of redundancy. It's just like, that's the thing. It's just like people say, oh, the private sector is very, very efficient. It's like, no, the private sector will run absolutely everything on a shoestring, which means if you get even the slightest shock to the system, everything falls apart. COVID. Anyway. And it is,
And ultimately, it's about, we've got to educate and push the DFT, because they're the specifiers. Yeah. Their lack of strategy is the reason why we do not have enough rolling stock in this country, because they simply didn't procure any. They created a system in which it was the cheapest thing for the rolling stock operating companies was to not buy any more rolling stock and to just run the existing rolling stock until it fell to bits. So we needed, that just removed any incentive for new rolling stock. Now we've had a huge tranche of new rolling stock, an enormous volume, huge spike all at once, of which that's still only barely enough to run the service that we're supposed to have. Why we shrink that things. Anyway, so I'm moaning about the problems, but the solutions are to raise it with your elected politicians, raise it with directly to the Transport Select Committee, for example. So they're very good at holding DFT to account. It's discussing
Yeah.
things with, getting local campaign groups, local cycling campaign groups, local passenger groups, and encouraging them to talk about the benefits of improved cycling, the tourist benefits of having particularly in the near yourself and Derbyshire as an example of a place that's very cycle heavy. But actually, not even everywhere. Leicestershire is fantastic for cycling. There are so many options.
Leicestershire is fantastic for cycling. I mean, in fact, I think this will be the next picture along, but I do want to just touch along things which could be better in my neck of the woods, because out to the east of Leicester, there's basically nothing until you get to Oakham and Peterborough, and between there, there's just there's a vast swathe of countryside, which there's almost no cars in it. There's a few tractors, a few sheep, that kind of things. But there's so many fantastic places to cycle, which people just don't, because it's such a pain in the ass to get to. You could cycle all the way out of Leicester, but you got to do that on main roads, because the cycle lanes in the East City are just basically non-existent. And then there is, the closed Great Northern Line from Leicester Belgrave Road to Melton Mowbray, and then I think to the south it runs. I forget where it runs to the south. But there's this whole closed railway line on the flat with almost all of the permanent way infrastructure still intact. That could be turned into a cycling path, but just no one's done it, because it's just well, you see, we haven't got a business case for it. We don't think enough people are using it. Just well, not there. You got to at some point take the plunge and say, hey, this is a good thing, its own merits, we're going to do it anyway.
And part of that is creating the idea that there's the full picture. Because if you can get the train to one end of a really popular cycling area, or to if you know that there's going to be bike space, then it encourages you to do cycle tourism, which is an increasingly popular thing. We've briefly lost Lindsay's pinging at us. I'm sure she'll reappear in a second. Lindsay, you're back. We've got you back. It's fine. You only dropped out for a few seconds.
Yep. Can you hear my audio just fine?
Yeah, nice and clear.
Yeah, cool.
I was just saying that one of the frustrating things is that there's this opportunity. If the cycling provision was better, you could create this sort of tourist infrastructure, encourage people to do cycle touring, and cycle, bike and train sort of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, the Great Northern, which I mentioned, that's long closed. But because it runs through such a rural area, the trackbed's all still there. That could be an absolutely fantastic trail, like the Monsell Trail, call it the Great Northern Way, and it's got, it crosses deep valleys, it's got a tunnel on it, it's got so many interesting features to it that just at the moment just sitting there just rotting slowly in undergrowth, and I'm just well, that's, its business case as a railway was always extremely dubious, even for the railway mania of the sort of late 1840s. But it'd be a fantastic cycle path, and it's just a shame that no one seems to have the vision or the desire to do that.
Yeah, and battles like that are still being fought across the country, and it's deeply frustrating that everyone gets hung up on business case without seeing the opportunity. Talking of which, so there are two talking of whiches, actually, because the first talking of which is you sat outside a railway tunnel.
Oh yeah, this is Thurnby Tunnel on the line I was just talking about. This is it's a former double track tunnel, and I slightly went off course a little bit to go search it out, and I found it and went exploring a little bit. Didn't go in it for obvious reasons, but besides being a bat hibernaculum, the other end of it has been filled, I think, with manure, but the tunnel structure is fine, and it's just why is this just sitting there closed and forcing cyclists onto the A47, which is extremely busy and full of lorries, when you could just be riding through this nice, dark, damp tunnel, but with electric lighting instead? So
yeah, that's there.
Just,
and there
I mentioned this briefly when I was talking about building e-bikes, but I hate waste. I hate just seeing stuff go unused and underappreciated. I'm just hi, this thing exists. It could be really, really good if anybody gave a crap. And I'm just please, somebody start giving a crap, and I will yell about it until someone does start giving a crap. So
And there's so many railway tunnels in and around, basically everywhere between Leicester and Leeds. It's just that bit of the UK. There's such a dense number of former railways, because it's such coal, former industry, and lots of double track tunnels. Nottingham and Leicester have a plethora of unused tunnels. Yeah. Some of them in more usable states than others for a variety of reasons. I like that this has bird holes cut in it for the bats, I presume.
Oh, bat holes.
Yes. Some corrugated iron in front of the portal of the tunnel for those who are listening and not watching.
Yeah, it's the same kind of annoying thing with Glenfield Tunnel, which Leicester City Council bought Glenfield Tunnel for I think £5 when the line closed, and rather than do anything useful with it, we instead filled the eastern approach cutting with rubble, and then built houses atop it, which means that the tunnel is a pain in the ass to access. and it runs under a lot of my ward with a lot of houses built directly on top of the line of the tunnel. And if anybody wants to know why shutting off a dubiously old tunnel with no regular inspection regimen that I know of, because nobody's told me about that, if anyone wants to know why that's a bad idea, look up Black Harry Tunnel, because this was on the Greater Manchester, and it shows what happens when you build houses directly on top of old tunnels that's not regularly inspected, that are old enough to have a lot of weird undocumented stuff in their linings. So, yeah. Glenfield Tunnel, to be fair, it's been reinforced, it's been lined. I think it's inspected regularly, but it's sort of like, it's something I've been asking about an awful lot, and people have just been like, oh no, we don't really like to talk about that. And I'm just like, well, people are starting to talk about it, and there's people like, oh, I found out there's an old railway tunnel under my house. Is it going to fall in on me? And I'm just like, I'm trying to get you an answer to that, but they're being very slow about it. So, hey.
So, Simon's asking if you've been to two tunnels in Bath, if you've ever been down to see the tunnels down in Bath. I haven't.
I haven't, but it's on my list, and that's sort of like one of the projects which kind of inspired me to sort of like push for Glenfield Tunnel to be open when, whenever it is that the houses over the eastern end life expire and, the land comes up for sale, which, it'll happen eventually. It's worth doing. It's just...
Well, you plan for the future.
Forward planning and local government.
Yeah. So,
biggest bugbear.
We've also been asked, wait a minute, I think it was Michael. Michael, you asked this, didn't you? Let me just whiz up. There's a lot of people talking about their pet line, the demand for bike travel, and so actually, Chris Bird is pointing out that that his pet heritage line at Sheringham has quite a demand for bike travel, so they attach a van because they can, because it's a heritage line. Generally, a GUV on the back and fill it with bicycles. That's quite nice.
Yeah, that's not bad, is it?
That's not bad. Michael C. So this is a question he's asked twice, and I've ignored both times, not deliberately. What are the opinions from either of us on e-scooters? Oh, what do you think about e-scooters?
They'd be better off as electric bikes, but I don't hate them.
Yeah, that's kind of my feeling on them too. What I don't like is and this is for me as any kind of spot hire stuff. I don't like the dockless e-scooters, just like I don't like dockless bikes, because they just end up stacked up on the pavement in the way of people trying to walk around. So my opinion is basically that I don't mind e-scooters so long as people own them, not individual companies without a dock, so they just get scattered around and piled up on pavements. That's deeply frustrating. And likewise with bikes as well. Bike systems, the Lime system, I think they're really frustrating as well. If they're just kind of get piled up on the pavement. Lindsay, you're back. I was just saying that I think, and you probably share my feeling on this, is that so long as they're not just scattered around on the pavement like the higher ones, it's fine.
It's like I say, I don't mind them, but the whole reason the hire companies do what they do is those scooters only cost them about like 250 quid each. So, by the time they've hired them out a few times, they make the money back and they don't care. So it's sort of like, they end up scattered all over the place because, people just dump them there and then the companies don't have an incentive to clean them up. And I'm just like, I don't hate them. Again, I don't hate electric scooters, but at the same time, I'm just like, this is the same basic components as would be on an electric bike. It's just a lot less practical. So I'm just, what's kind of the point? But again, if it gets people out of their cars, I don't mind. It's just, like you say, the dockless hire schemes.
Yeah. Andy Savage, it's worth a mention, Andy. Thanks for keeping us up to date with the National Rail Heritage Awards. You're retweeting all of their all their stuff. So that Andy Savage of the Railway Heritage. Andy, I've gone. Is the Railway Heritage Association? No, it's not. That's not right. In any case, Andy funds a lot of the things like the reopenings, and he's just saying that Two Tunnels he highly recommends it, and it was one of the ones that that Railway Heritage Association contributed to allow it to reopen. So thanks for that, and thanks for joining us on the feed, Andy. The next one is kind of broadly the same theme, really, which is this is your this is actually your recumbent, right? This is the same recumbent that you had in the bicycle.
This
in the
is
train
the
picture.
same recumbent I bought on the train. In fact, this is actually the same day I ended up in Oakham, if I remember correctly, because I'd heard about because this is John O'Gaunt Viaduct out near John O'Gaunt, funnily enough, and I sort of heard about it because I discovered the Great Northern in Leicester even existed because of old OS maps, and I saw, hey, there's these viaducts and tunnels marked. I wonder if they still exist. So I kind of like set out looking for them to see if I could try to find them. And this, honestly, it's like, this is kind of a symbol, I think, of the waste of our, redundant railway infrastructure in this country, is that this is just sitting there in the countryside, slowly spalling away, And you get absolutely fantastic views from the top of it. You've got the trackbed either side, which is basically intact, and it's just sitting there doing nothing when it could be, hosting again an absolutely fantastic cycle trail. Like, getting between Melton, Mowbray, and Leicester on a bike at the moment is difficult and dangerous because there's a lot of hills and there's a lot of fast roads and a lot of dangerous drivers on them. And this line, like, it closed, it's like 60 years ago now, but the trackbed's still there. You could put asphalt down and put railings up on the bridge.
Yeah, reinstating cycle paths. Yeah, it's not backbreakingly expensive to do so. It's within the purview of it's within council budgets, which universally have been slashed to within an inch of their life.
I mean, our operating budgets have been slashed. We actually still have an enormous pool of sort of like money we can use for capital investments, but again, they'd rather do this on things like. Oh, well, I can't possibly comment, but the old, for instance, the old New Walk Centre in Leicester, which the City Council spent, I think, £6 million clearing and remediating the site and doing public realm improvements, and then we sold the freehold to the property developer for £24,000. So there's money for that, but whenever it's something like unglamorous like this, which admittedly is in Leicester County Council's area rather than the City Council, just suddenly there's a lot of sucking in of teeth and just like, oh, well, we need to be very sure of the business case, you understand? And it's just, I don't know, your business case is it would bring a lot of business into local towns and villages. You'd have a lot of people with kids, a lot of families coming out to see it. It's a vital amenity. I think it would be, an asset to both the city and the county, and it would promote better cycling connectivity between Leicester and Melton Mowbray. Which, again, it's sort of like I would go to Melton Mowbray more often, when the farmers market was on. But the trouble is, I only ride a bike, and no way in hell am I going up the roads on that way because I don't have a death wish. So
yeah. I was going to say a lot of these provide, particularly with the density of former railway infrastructure in and around where you are. Actually, you can get some and combined with some of the slowways and kind of the sort of quiet back roads, you get some really nice, frankly, commuting connections by bike. For people who live a bit out of town.
Yeah, because I mean, like the Great Northern through Leicester itself, there's bits of it left, but a lot of it is just gone for the city because it was built over. But again, it's like there's a lot of the outer estates, sort of like Thurmby Lodge and that kind of place, which are basically on the old trackbed, which have very poor cycle connectivity to the rest of the city because just it wasn't built. And just like, if you reopened the bits of this line that survive and then connect it through those estates, you'd not only be getting this wonderful tourist amenity out into the county, but you'd also be helping out the city an awful lot by providing better cycling infrastructure so people can actually get to work without having to spend a lot of money on bus fares or having to brave the frankly lethal roads between where they live and where they work. Because that's the other thing. Like as you say, Leicestershire is absolutely lousy with closed railway lines. There's the old Midland counties between Leicester and Rugby, for instance, which make a fantastic cycle path. Because again, almost all of it's still there, the trackbed anyway, and it's just a lack of vision, a lack of willingness to commit a paltry few £1 million to this wonderful fantastic thing. And like John O'Gaunt Viaduct there is not in the greatest shape in the world. Like there's a couple of arches which are fairly badly spalled, but on the virtue of the fact that it's not carrying anything, it's not like it's degrading massively, and it's just like, you spend a couple of million restoring this thing, you get a massive tourist attraction. Like, it's an absolutely fantastic part of the countryside. I mean,
they're fantastic. This is it, and this is where Andy, I should correct myself, because Andy Savage, of course, is involved with the Railway Heritage Trust. That's the RHT. I was getting my organisations confused. Sorry, Andy. I've done this before as well, Andy, haven't I? I do apologise. In any case, Andy supports the reinstating this sort of thing. He's curious as to who owns this asset, because he's saying that both Sustrans and railway paths have done a bit around here.
Yeah, because I've been trying to find that out actually through the Land Registry, but their website is so antiquated, it's very difficult to find out who owns it. But yeah, honestly, if you want to sort of like get in contact with me and we can discuss this in more detail, I'll be very, very up for that, honestly. So please do get in touch.
Yeah, definitely. And it's, in fact, this is okay. We've overrun slightly, an hour 23. It's okay. We have but this brings us basically, Lindsay, to the conclusion of our piece, really, which is that which is quite nice, because it's talking about the fact that there is sort of this harmony, and it's not just about railways that function and bicycles, but there is this harmony of former railways are fantastic assets for cycling, and in fact also cycling. Then what you're doing is protecting, as we've mentioned in a previous episode of RailNatter, actually, the cycle path then is actually protecting the right of way as well. If for whatever reason you want to reinstate it for light rail or heavy rail in the future. That was one of the big clangers Leicester City Council dropped, because we had the old Great Central and Great Northern all the way through the city, and we've just let the city sections get destroyed and fragmented because we didn't protect them.
It's like, because in New York City, they got this thing called the High Line, which again is like a disused railway running right through the heart of the city. They turned it into an elevated park, and it's absolutely wonderful. It attracts millions of visitors every year, and it's just like, you could see these things as a liability, as something, oh, it's slowly decaying, we're going to have to do something with it eventually, or you could see it as an asset. And like I said earlier, I really wish the government would, pull its finger out and get back to the business of actually governing, of, not worrying so much about, profit motive, but instead just like, this is a good thing and it'll benefit the public and it's, good overall. We don't care that it's not going to make money because it's just a good thing on its own merits. It doesn't necessarily need a business case. So
thinking about how good it would be if there was like a suspended park in the Great Central Birdcage Bridge had it not been ripped down. I mean, for better or worse, the Great Central, for better or worse, was gone. But it would have been so nice, even if it wasn't a railway, just an asset, kind of a community owned or a community sort of available asset there. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So lots of frustration for all of us. But actually, it's really about how much of there is a kind of a happy union of railways and bicycles, and there are lots of things we can do and push towards to help make that even happier. But also e-bikes, get involved. So I suppose in terms of e-bikes, it's that buying them can be very expensive, and if you've got the means, okay, that's fine. But actually, there are options if you don't have the means to get YouTube out and Google how to put them together, or indeed employ Lindsay to create you them.
Yeah, I've got a couple on the go at the moment, but I've got a lot of availability coming up later this month, so I'll be happy to take on anything anyone wants to give me. So yeah,
they are everyone. You heard it here. Well, actually, you didn't hear it here first. But Lindsay is available to provide bicycles if you really want to get an e-bike for Christmas. Lindsay's where to go. Oh, Lindsay, thanks for that. So
you're very welcome. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, so we have right as ever, we are available in all good podcasting websites if you fancy listening to this instead of watching it. Thanks to those who are listening. The Patreon. Yes, do support me on Patreon. A few new Patreon supporters of late, actually. Thanks to all of you who've joined the Patreon recently. That allows you privileges to see some of the strange and wacky things that I get up to on Discord, including planning for future episodes, but also some of the other nonsense. Discord at garethdennis.co.uk/Discord is it's chaos, but there's lots of things happen on there, and it's run by people who are both younger and cleverer than me, so I'd heartily recommend it. But there's also a lot of discussion between engineers. There's and sort of rail professionals, not just engineers, I should say. It's rail professionals and new people coming into the industry. So there's a lot of good discussion about career options, about there's some CV chat going on. There's discussions about there's all sorts of interesting discussion going on between rail professionals that you can sort of dip into. Like it's a bit like Rail Natter, but with hundreds and hundreds of people on it. 310, I think now. So get involved. It's good fun. And also PayPal. There's the links. I always say it every week. It's there for you to throw pennies at me if you wish to. It's not next week, so I'm going to put two adverts in. Normally I don't advertise this on here because it's a computer game and not everyone is into gaming who watches Rail Natter, but this series has sort of taken on a life of its own without meaning to, and it's getting a bigger and bigger viewership, so I thought I'd mention it. Is that another series has been going on other than Rail Natter the last few weeks, which is building a railway on a tropical island, and it's happening very slowly, but go if you want to know what on earth I'm talking about, go and watch that. And this will probably be coming out on Friday, episode 8. So there's already 8 episodes, and they're quite long. So if you like watching city builders and watching a railway engineer doing a city builder and making track alignments that actually are real and functional, then that's the video for you. Next week, talking of which, episode 39 of Rail Natter. 39. Crikey. We're going to be talking about slab track. It's an episode I've been promising for absolutely ages. And this is going to be the episode where Ivana Avramovic from POR, the premier slab track manufacturer, if anyone here is from not from POR, sorry, then yes, do join us next week for that. Van will be joining us to talk about slab track. Given that POR have just won the HS2 contract, yes, watch this. It'll be very interesting. I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be good. I'm going to learn all about slab track. Which only remains for me to say. Lindsay, thank you so much. That's been a really interesting... I mean, there's so much... I'm going to have to rewatch that and write down some things that I have to Google, basically, because there's a lot in there, but it's really, really interesting stuff. Thank you so much for joining us.
Genuine, thank you for having me on.
And I think we've had many discussions of gone in the chat. So pop your questions underneath in the and I'll try and answer them. Lindsay as well can answer them as well on the YouTubes.
Yeah, I will. I'll get that up now because I've not had the stream up actually because my internet is. So I'll be in the chat for a good long while if anyone wants to ask me anything. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, definitely. We'll keep the chat up and also pop comments in underneath if you are still wanting to have questions answered, and also Twitter, of course. I'll make sure Lindsay's Twitter handle is in the description. All I can say is cheerio. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Thanks for joining us, Lindsay. Yeah,
Thank you very much.
everyone. Cheerio.